Decoding before writing. Pillar. Best friend confession. But the mechanic is an inversion the framework hasn't used yet across all 6 scripts. The MC says the true thing about her without knowing he's saying it about himself. He tells her she deserves better than the men she's been choosing. She tells him he's already there. The confession isn't a revelation, it's a correction. She's pointing at something he placed without knowing he'd placed it. Hook type. Type B, third-party mirror, except the third party is him. He holds the mirror up to her situation, and she turns it around. The dramatic irony is total. The audience understands before the last word of the hook what he doesn't understand until much later. The structural problem this title creates. The confession happens in the hook. She says it clearly, directly. The most unambiguous declaration in all 6 scripts so far. Which means the script can't be, will she say it? It has to be. Why didn't he believe her when she did? What did he do with it? How did a man who was already there manage to take 3 months to understand that he'd arrived? The deeper problem, if he dismisses it, if he tells himself she didn't mean it, or said it in emotion, or was confused, he risks being unsympathetic. The framework's MC is self-aware about his own failures. He has to know he's doing it. He has to dismiss it consciously, tell the reader exactly why, and be wrong in a way the reader can see even when he can't. The specific dramatic engine, she said it once, clearly, and then she let him decide what to do with it. She didn't walk it back, didn't perform forgetting, didn't give him an easy out. She just waited. The revelation spiral is him living in that waiting and slowly understanding that she meant it, has always meant it, and that the men she'd been choosing were wrong in a very specific way he's been too close to see. Inciting event. The conversation itself, but the scene that breaks the status quo is the specific moment he gave the speech. Not an abstract declaration, a specific night, a specific bad situation with a specific man, and him saying the thing he said because he couldn't not say it anymore. Her signature prop, something she gave him a long time ago, before the script begins, before they knew what it would mean. I'll use a spare key. Not a dramatic spare key, a mundane one, given for practical reasons years ago, that he still has, that she never asked back for. He finds it. That's the crack in the revelation spiral. Confession shape. She goes first in the hook, fully, directly, no ambiguity. He has to go second, and he has to go second having had time to understand what he's saying, which makes his confession the harder one. Saying it fast is brave. Saying it after you've had months to think about it and know exactly what it means, that's something else. Tone. This one wants the most interiority of all 7. The dry wit fires, but it's the most reflective version. He's narrating from after, and he knows how wrong he was, and the self-deprecation has a rueful quality rather than a comic one. He is, as he says, the last person to understand something everyone else apparently already knew. She was crying, and I was the one who had made her cry, and I had done it by telling her the truth about what she deserved. And she looked at me with her eyes bright and said, "I already found him. It's you." I said nothing. I said nothing for long enough that something shifted in her face, not hurt, not quite. More like a woman who has said the bravest thing she knows how to say, and is now watching to see what happens to it. She wiped her eyes once, quickly, the way she did when she was done crying and not interested in being seen to continue. Then she said, "You don't have to do anything with that." Then she went home. I stood in my own kitchen for 40 minutes after the door closed, holding a mug I had stopped drinking from, thinking about what she had said and what it meant and what I was going to do with it. What I did with it, initially, was nothing. This was the wrong call. I have not stopped knowing it was the wrong call since. My name is Joel Ashworth. I'm 35. I work in landscape photography. I spend a significant portion of my life in places where the light is doing something specific, and the rest of it in a studio in Bermondsey, trying to make the photographs mean what the places meant. It is solitary work that I have always been suited to, which tells you something about me that I have been revising lately. I live in a flat in South London with good windows and the kind of quiet that is either peaceful or too much depending on the day. I have lived there for 5 years. I have had a spare key on my hook for 4.5 of those years that does not belong to me. Her name was Lena Cross. She was 33. She was a secondary school art teacher, which meant she spent her days trying to make 15-year-olds believe that what they saw was worth putting down, that their angle on the world had value even before they had the skill to render it perfectly. She was very good at this, in the way that people are good at things they believe completely. She had long hair she tied back when she was working and let down when she wasn't. A laugh that was slightly too loud for small rooms and exactly right for everything else. And the quality of someone who found the interesting thing in every situation she walked into, and then found the interesting thing underneath that. She had been my best friend for 7 years. We had met at a group exhibition, her sister's work, my work, a gallery in Peckham on a Thursday night. And we had talked for 2 hours about whether photography was cheating compared to painting, which is the kind of argument that is actually about something else entirely. And she had won, and I had been looking for reasons to talk to her since. The spare key had appeared in the 2nd year. She had a habit of locking herself out, not carelessness, just the particular focus of a person whose attention was always on something more interesting than keys. And after the 3rd time I had come to let her in, I had cut a spare without being asked. She had taken it. She had never given it back. Neither of us had mentioned it in 4.5 years, which was either very normal or told you everything. The series of men before me, not before me. I was not in the series, the series of men she had been with in 7 years, were taken together, a pattern I had spent considerable time not looking at directly. They were men who were present but not attentive, available but not chosen. She gave them her time and her thinking and her laugh that was too loud for small rooms, and they did not understand what they had. And eventually she left, or they left, and she was fine, and she was always fine. She folded it away and moved on. The most recent was a man called Patrick. Patrick had been 5 months and had ended badly, in the way that some endings are bad, not because of what happens, but because of what they confirm. That it was always going to end. That it had never been right. That she had known this and tried anyway. I had watched it the way I had watched all of them. From the position of the person who was always there afterward. And I had said the right things. And I had been a good friend. And on the night Patrick finally ended, I had sat with her in my kitchen and said, with more feeling than I had planned, the thing I had been not saying for longer than I was prepared to examine. I had said, Lena, you keep choosing men who don't know what to do with you. You are not a difficult person to love. You are the easiest person I know to love. You deserve someone who understands that before you have to teach them. She had looked at me for a long moment. Then her eyes had filled, and she had said it, and I had said nothing. And she had gone home, and I had held a cooling mug in my kitchen for 40 minutes and decided, with impressive commitment to my own blindness, that she had said it in emotion, that it was the gratitude of a person who had just been told something kind, that it meant something adjacent to what it sounded like but not exactly what it sounded like, and that treating it as exactly what it sounded like would be complicated, would risk 7 years, would be the kind of decision you couldn't take back. I was very good at this conclusion. I held it for 11 days. She texted the following morning as though nothing had happened, which was either because she was fine or because she was giving me room. And I could not tell which and was not brave enough to ask. We texted every day as we always had. We had lunch the following week, and she was herself. Warm and sharp and present. Finding the interesting thing underneath the interesting thing, making me laugh twice in the first 10 minutes. She did not mention the kitchen. I did not mention the kitchen. This was, I now understand, its own kind of answer. She had meant it. People who say things in emotion and don't mean them want to walk them back, or are relieved when you let them, or become careful in the specific way of someone managing an embarrassment. She was none of those things. She was just Lena, waiting, with the patience of a person who had said what she needed to say, and was now giving the other person time to catch up. I did not catch up immediately. What I did instead was notice things I had been not noticing for 7 years, which was its own slow catastrophe. I noticed that I had never, in 7 years, not wanted to see her. I noticed that my week was structured around when she was in it, and felt different in her absence, in a way I had attributed to friendship and was now reconsidering. I noticed that the photographs I was most proud of were the ones I had shown her first, before anyone else, including editors and the gallerists who paid for them. I noticed that the spare key had been on my hook for 4.5 years, and I had never once thought about removing it, and had, twice, when she hadn't texted by 9 at night, looked at it. I noticed that the speech I had given her in the kitchen, "You are the easiest person I know to love," was not something I had decided to say. It had come out because it was true. I had been saying it about her to myself, without words, for considerably longer than one kitchen conversation. I was beginning to understand. The last person to know something that was apparently not a secret to anyone else. The confirmation came from an unexpected direction. Her sister, Maya, texted me on a Thursday in the 3rd week. Maya was 30, she was a graphic designer, and she had the quality of a younger sibling who had been watching a situation from the sidelines for years and had very strong opinions about it. The text said, "Joel, I'm going to say something, and you can ignore it, but I'm going to say it anyway." I said, "Okay." She said, "She's had that key on her key ring for 5 years. Not the one you gave her, her main one. She moved it there when you gave it to her, and it's been there ever since. She has never once been locked out in 5 years, because she has never once left home without it. She gave you a reason. It was always an excuse." I put my phone down and looked at the spare key on my hook. I picked the phone back up. I said, "Maya?" She said, "I know." I said, "How long has everyone known?" She said, "Everyone has known for approximately forever, Joel. Some of us have been waiting politely." I put the phone down again. I sat in the studio for a long time, looking at the light through the good windows and thinking about a woman who had moved a key to her main ring 5 years ago and carried it every day and never once needed to use it and had never said a word about it. Who had given me a reason that was an excuse. Who had carried the beginning of the thing for 5 years, waiting for me to carry the other end. Who had said it clearly in a kitchen 3 weeks ago and then gone home and waited. I was very tired of making her wait. She opened the door on a Saturday morning with paint on her hands, which meant she'd been working, which meant it was before noon because she always worked in the morning when the light was right. She looked at me on the doorstep with the expression of a person who is reading a situation carefully before she lets herself react to it. I held up the spare key. She looked at it. Maya told me, I said, about the key, about your key. I kept my voice level, because this required levelness, because I had spent 3 weeks and 40 minutes in a kitchen and a conversation with a 20-year-old being wrong about something simple, and I was going to say what I needed to say correctly. I want to say something, and I need you to let me say all of it before you. Okay, she said. I looked at her. Paint on her hands, Saturday morning, the light behind her doing something specific that I would have photographed if I'd had a camera and a different kind of attention available. You said I was already there. I didn't say anything, and that was wrong. And I have been wrong about it every day since. Not because I didn't understand you. Because I understood you exactly, and I was afraid of what understanding you meant. She was very still. I have the spare key because I have never once considered that you shouldn't have a way into this flat. I have never looked at it and thought about taking it down. In 5 years, it has not occurred to me to take it down. And that is not a landlord thing or a practical thing or a friendship thing. That is what it is. I looked at her. I told you that you were the easiest person I know to love, and I meant it as a fact about you. I've spent 3 weeks understanding it was also a confession about me. I stopped. I am not good at saying things before I know exactly what they are. I know exactly what this is. She looked at the key, then at me. Then she reached out and took the key from my hand and held it for a moment. Her key, the one she'd carried for 5 years, the one she'd never needed to use, because she'd never let herself forget it. Then she put it in her pocket, where it belonged, and she stepped back from the door, and I came in. She still had paint on her hands. I did not care about the paint on my jacket. She laughed when she saw what she'd done, that laugh too loud for small rooms. And I thought about 7 years of that laugh in every space she'd walked into, and how I had filed it under friendship and how thoroughly I had been wrong. I cried, she said, in your kitchen. I said the most terrifying thing I've ever said, and you held a mug at me. I held the mug at myself. The mug was for me. It wasn't a good look, Joel. It was not, I agreed. I'm aware. 3 weeks. I know. I was very patient. You were extraordinarily patient. It's one of a significant number of things about you that I have apparently been in love with for longer than I've been willing to admit. I looked at her. Paint and Saturday morning, and the light exactly right. We can discuss the mug at length. I'd just like to do it from the other side of having said that. She stepped forward and put her paint-covered hands on either side of my face, and kissed me the way you kiss someone when you have been waiting to for a very long time and have finally, completely, run out of reasons not to. From her kitchen table, her phone lit up with a text from Maya that read, without preamble, finally. Lena pulled back, looked at the phone, looked at me. She's been watching the street, she said. Obviously. She's the worst. She texted me on Thursday, I said. She told me about the key. Lena stared at me. She what? She felt the timeline needed accelerating. Lena closed her eyes briefly in the expression of an older sibling who loves a younger sibling and finds them completely insufferable. Then she picked up the phone and typed back 3 words I did not see. Maya's response was a single emoji. I decided not to ask. You owe her, I said. Absolutely not, Lena said. She interfered. She interfered correctly. That doesn't mean... She stopped. Looked at me with the expression she had when the argument was over, because she knew I was right and was deciding how to feel about it. Fine. She interfered correctly. She picked up her paintbrush from the table. I'm going to finish what I was doing. You can stay. I was planning to. Good. She turned back to the canvas. There's coffee. You know where it is. I did know where it was. I had always known where it was. I had known where everything was in her flat for 7 years, in the specific way you know a place you've spent enough time in that it stops being someone else's and becomes partially yours. I made 2 coffees. I sat on the kitchen counter the way I always sat on the kitchen counter. She painted and I watched and we talked, which is what we had always done. Except now we were doing it as what we were, which was what we had probably always been. It didn't feel new. It felt like something that had always been true, named finally, in the specific relief of a word that fits the thing it describes. 4 months later, the key question was resolved practically. She kept hers. I got one of hers. The exchange was conducted without ceremony on a Tuesday evening and acknowledged by neither of us for 3 days, at which point she mentioned it in passing. And I said I'd been wondering when she'd notice. And she said she'd noticed immediately and had been waiting for me to say something. And I said that was very on brand for both of us, and she said yes, it was, wasn't it? A year after that, I photographed her at the kitchen table on a Sunday morning. Light from the good windows catching the side of her face. And it was the best photograph I had ever taken. I did not exhibit it. It was not for exhibiting. It went on the wall above my desk because it was mine. And it was true. And it was the best record I had of the thing I had been documenting without knowing it for 7 years. The specific quality of a person who found the interesting thing underneath the interesting thing and made every space she walked into worth being in. When people asked how it started, she told them about the kitchen, the speech, the tears, the mug. She told it the way she told everything. Finding the interesting thing underneath, the detail that mattered, which in this case was the mug, which she described as his emotional support object, which I did not dispute. I told them about the key, about Maya's text on a Thursday, about standing in a studio looking at a piece of metal on a hook and understanding, with the slow certainty of a person who has finally let himself look at something directly, that it had never been about locking herself out. She already had the key. She had always had it. She had just been waiting for me to understand that it was also mine. What would you have done if you said the truest thing you'd ever said about someone, and it turned out you were describing yourself? And have you ever kept something small for years without asking why and only understood it later? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.